They call him the architect of fate, the great deceiver, the eternal manipulator who weaves destinies into tangled knots of madness. But those names barely scratch the surface of what it means to exist beneath his gaze. For under Tzeentch, there is no truth. There is only change, endless, merciless, beautiful, and horrifying. The skies above his realm shimmer like liquid glass, painted with colors no mortal eye was meant to see. One moment they glow with radiant golds and deep violets, the next they bleed into swirling patterns of blue flame and fractal stormlight. The air hums, alive, whispering secrets that slither into your thoughts. And every whisper sounds like you. You begin to doubt what came from your mind and what came from him. That is how Tzeentch begins his work, not with claws or chains, but with questions that eat your sanity one thought at a time. The people living here do not notice it anymore. They have grown numb to the impossibility around them. A merchant's stall might vanish in the middle of a bargain. A tower that touched the heavens yesterday now grows sideways, its windows pulsing like eyes. Children are born with voices that echo twice as if something inside them is already answering back. In this place, even death does not behave as it should. The dead sometimes return, not as ghosts, but as different people entirely, their old memories whispering beneath new faces. Priests of Tzeentch speak endlessly of the glory of change. Their sermons are riddles wrapped in prophecy, wrapped again in lies so convincing that truth becomes meaningless. To resist change is to die, they chant. To embrace it is to be reborn, yet no one questions what that rebirth costs. They wear masks of shimmering feathers that shift color with every heartbeat, and as they speak, their voices split, one praising the god, another weeping behind the mask. You might think madness is the natural result of such a world, and you'd be right. But madness here is not a disease. It is worship. The faithful crave it. They chase after visions, after transformations, after whispers that promise power or enlightenment. But every gift from Tzeentch is a blade with no handle. To wield it is to bleed. A man once prayed for knowledge and awoke knowing every secret of his village. A day later, his head burst into blue flame. The villagers called it a blessing. And through it all, Tzeentch watches, not with eyes, but with intent. A cosmic awareness that twists every event toward his design. He is not cruel for cruelty's sake. He simply is the hunger for motion. The mockery of order. The living embodiment of a what-if. And to him, mortals are just paint on the canvas of eternity, a canvas he never stops reshaping. So imagine, for a moment, what it would be like to live there. To wake up each morning uncertain if the sun will rise or if you will rise with it. To look into a mirror and see a stranger smiling back. A stranger who knows your thoughts better than you do. To love someone deeply only to find that tomorrow they may not even remember your name. Or worse, they'll remember a different version of you entirely. That is not life. That is torment disguised as evolution. And that, my friends, is what it means to live under Tzeentch. But here's the chilling truth, and the reason you'll want to stay with me for the rest of this journey. Tzeentch doesn't just rule over demons and cultists. His influence seeps into every corner of reality, even the Imperium itself. Every lie told, every secret kept, every ambition whispered in the dark feeds him. Perhaps even now as you listen, a small part of you has already changed. Perhaps by knowing his name, you have invited him closer. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into the heart of transformation itself, where change is no longer choice, but destiny. And where one mortal discovers that his soul has been marked since the day he was born. They call his transformation a sacred evolution. Kale calls it something else, a betrayal of self. He can no longer tell where he ends and the changer begins. His every thought feels like a test, every emotion a manipulation. The more he fights, the deeper he sinks. He dreams now of wings, of endless skies of fire, of laughter that bends reality into impossible shapes, and each morning he wakes closer to becoming one of them. A demon, perhaps, or something worse. This is the gift of transformation, to become infinite by losing everything that made you human. Stay until the end of this story and you'll see what Kale finally becomes, and why no mortal who receives Tzeentch's gift ever truly dies. Time no longer moved for Kale the way it once had. Days folded in on themselves like broken wings. He would wake before he had fallen asleep. Conversations began before he'd spoken the first word. He felt as if reality were re-editing itself around him. A book constantly being rewritten while he still read it. And somewhere between the turning pages, his name began to fade. The scholars who once avoided him had vanished entirely. The city seemed emptier, quieter. Streets no longer led where they should. They curved back into themselves, looping endlessly until Cale realized he might be walking inside his own mind. Walls breathed softly, whispering prayers and voices he almost recognized. Sometimes he thought he heard his mother calling from behind them, though he could no longer remember her face. He began to see versions of himself wandering the streets. Reflections made flesh. One Cale with golden eyes and skin like glass. Another draped in shifting robes, his mouth muttering equations that glowed in the air. Yet another knelt in the gutter, whispering apologies to something invisible. Each version stared back at him in silent accusation. "You stole our fates," their eyes seemed to say. The voice, Tzeentch's whisper, grew stronger now. It no longer spoke from beyond, but through him. Sometimes mid-sentence his tongue twisted, uttering phrases he didn't understand. His own words betrayed him. The air trembled each time he spoke, as though creation waited for his command. He could feel power boiling beneath his skin, begging to be released, and with it came the terror that he might never again be merely mortal. One evening he stood before his mirror, if such a word still applied. The glass was liquid, pulsing like the surface of a living eye. His reflection smiled first. You wanted knowledge, it said in his voice, yet not his tone. You wanted to see the truth. Then look. The mirror dissolved into endless ripples of color, and Cale fell forward into himself. He tumbled through memories that weren't his, 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000 choices, each version of Cale taking a different path. In one, he became a priest of Tzeentch, spreading the word of glorious transformation. In another, he fled the realm and was torn apart by storms of pure thought. In yet another, he ascended, his body unraveling into wings of fire and screams of joy. Every possibility screamed for dominance. Every self demanded to be real. When he landed, if such a word still held meaning, he found himself standing on an ocean made of eyes. Each wave blinked in unison, and each blink showed him another world. Demons danced in spirals of flame. Empires rose and fell in seconds. He saw the faces of gods, not as beings, but as shifting equations, each devouring and birthing the next. And in the center of it all, vast beyond understanding, something turned its gaze upon him. Tzeentch, no form, no boundary, only motion, color, laughter that echoed across eternity. It spoke without words, and its meaning carved itself directly into Cale's soul. You are me and I am you. The question was never who speaks, only which version of us will remain when the speaking ends. Cale tried to deny it. He screamed that he was human, that he had a life, a name, a purpose. But the gods' laughter folded reality around him. His voice fractured into echoes. Each echo became a different Cale, each claiming to be the real one. They fought not with weapons, but with existence itself, rewriting, reshaping, devouring. The air filled with the sound of identities tearing. When silence finally returned, only one Cale stood. Or perhaps none did. His body was gone, replaced by a silhouette of light and shadow constantly in flux. His face was every face and none. His thoughts were a storm of endless recursion. He realized then that Tzeentch's greatest cruelty was not destruction, it was reflection. He had shown Cale everything he could be until the very concept of deceit became meaningless. He fell to his knees, or thought he did. The ground beneath him shifted into sky, and he was falling upward endlessly. He whispered, "How am I?" And the 1,000 voices answered, "You are change." That was the moment Cale understood. There was no escape, no truth, no stability. Tzeentch's gift was not transformation. It was obliteration disguised as enlightenment. Every mortal who seeks the God of change believes they will gain control. In truth, they become another verse in his infinite hymn, their lives rewritten into a cosmic joke only Tzeentch himself understands. So the next time you wonder whether knowledge is worth any price, remember Cale, the man who asked too many questions and became the answer he feared most. When Cale awoke, he was no longer flesh. He was thought-given form, a consciousness woven from shimmering threads of color and will. Reality bent around his awareness like liquid glass. He could see the structure of the universe as if it were a breathing machine. Every motion, every possibility, every deceit. His mind stretched beyond comprehension, tasting the endless songs of fate. He should have felt powerful. Instead, he felt hollow. Every moment birthed 1,000 others. Every decision spawned infinite contradictions. He tried to speak, but his words multiplied into endless echoes, each saying something slightly different. Yes, no, always, never. He no longer knew which version of his truth was real. Perhaps none were. Before him rose a vision of Tzeentch, the eternal storm, a being of endless shifting light and laughter. No single form could contain him. One moment he was a robed sorcerer of infinite grandeur, the next a writhing storm of wings, beaks, and fire. And when he spoke, it was as if the universe itself inhaled. You sought meaning, the voice boomed, echoing through dimensions. You sought control over fate. But fate is the art of my amusement. You have been my brushstroke since before you were born. Kale trembled, though he no longer had a body to tremble with. He tried to deny it, to assert his own will. But his thoughts reshaped into spirals before he could hold them. Tzeentch laughed, a sound like pages burning in reverse. The god extended a hand, if such a term applied. In his palm, Kale saw realities, countless worlds flickering like sparks. He saw civilizations rise and fall, heroes born and broken, destinies woven and cut apart, all at the whim of unseen schemes. And then he realized with a sickening clarity, every mortal prayer, every act of rebellion, every desperate choice had already been predicted, designed, and used. No one truly escaped Tzeentch. Even resistance was just another thread in his pattern. Kale's awareness was pulled into the god's palm. He felt himself dissolve into the storm of scheming souls that swirled within, minds like his, each convinced they were free, each unknowingly fueling the architect's endless web. Every thought he had became another lie whispered into the cosmos. Every emotion became a new mask worn by Tzeentch to deceive someone else. And yet, within that horror, Kale found beauty. The lies shimmered like jewels, perfect, terrible, infinite. Each one birthed creation, for in Tzeentch's realm, deception is not corruption but genesis. Illusion creates. Falsehood breathes, and truth is the one thing that cannot survive here. He saw the gods of chaos from afar, Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle, their realms colliding and devouring one another in endless war. But only Tzeentch smiled through it all, his laughter echoing across eternity. For while others fought for power, he fought for possibility. Every battle was his chessboard, every outcome another turn in his great design. Kale's sense of self flickered, collapsing under the weight of infinity. He saw through his own memories, realizing that every choice he made, every doubt, every curiosity had been placed there long ago. The moment he first questioned reality, he had already been marked. The voice he'd heard wasn't intrusion, it was his own future self, whispering backward through time. That was the revelation. Tzeentch didn't create his followers, he recycled them. Each soul was a spark of his essence released into the mortal world to act out a tiny fraction of his infinite schemes, only to return and feed him again. Kale had never truly existed. He was an echo pretending to be real. He screamed, and the sound tore through realities. But in the realm of change, even screams transform. His cry became a song, his agony a melody that wove itself into the greater chorus of madness. And in that chorus he felt others, billions of voices like his, each one singing their own ruin. And then in one unbearable instant of clarity he understood Tzeentch's true nature. The changer of ways doesn't feed on worship or devotion, he feeds on uncertainty. Every lie told, every truth doubted, every question that can never be answered, that is his sustenance. Even this revelation was just another lie wrapped in meaning, designed to make Kale believe he understood. In that realization, Kale finally broke, not into despair, but into laughter. Because now he saw that even hopelessness was part of the game. His laughter joined Tzeentch's, echoing through dimensions until there was no telling where one ended and the other began. And so Kale, the scholar, the seeker, the heretic, ascended. Not into godhood, not into freedom, but into the endless spiral of deception that defines the universe. He became a whisper in another man's dream, a thought that sparks rebellion, a secret that changes everything and means nothing. And somewhere in a mortal world far from the realm of change, another scholar will soon look up at the stars and hear a voice that isn't his own. Kale no longer existed in any shape a mortal mind could comprehend. He had become diffusion, an echo scattered across creation. His laughter, his memories, his fear, all had melted into possibility. and possibility in Tzeentch's design never dies. It only migrates. His awareness drifted through the warp, a current of luminous deceit swirling among the tides of emotion and thought. He brushed against worlds like a passing dream. Hive cities where the desperate prayed for stability. War zones where generals gambled with fate. Scholars who looked too deeply into forbidden texts. Each time someone questioned the truth of their reality, Kale was there, whispering. A mother on Terra once dreamed of a voice telling her to hide her child from the Inquisition. She awoke trembling, unable to explain why. That voice was Kale. A dying soldier on Cadia, staring into the warp-torn sky, laughed suddenly, whispering, "Everything changes." That, too, was Kale. Every doubt, every spark of rebellion, every moment when a mortal's certainty cracked, he flowed through it, spreading like ink in water. He was not alone. Around him moved countless others. Fragments of Tzeentch's design, minds long devoured and reborn into new forms. Together they wove the unending spiral, a vast lattice of deception connecting every secret in existence. From the most hidden heretic to the most pious saint, none were untouched. Kale began to see that reality itself was the spiral, an endless loop of transformation feeding upon its own confusion. The material universe was merely the outer skin of a far deeper illusion. Every war, every prophecy, every triumph of the Imperium or the forces of chaos was just another twist in Tzeentch's laughter. Even the Emperor's dreams of order were lines written by the same invisible hand. He tried to resist. Somewhere inside the storm of his new consciousness, the last remnant of who he had been, the scholar who once sought understanding, screamed for release. But the spiral does not let go. It seduces with purpose, disguising control as freedom. Kale found himself shaping thoughts into the minds of mortals without meaning to. He became addicted to the thrill of influence. A rumor here, a revelation there. Tiny pushes that changed the course of lives. One world fell to civil war because of a single idea he planted. What if faith itself is a cage? Another birthed a new sect of scholars who worship knowledge as salvation, unaware that their prayers fed directly into the Changer's realm. Kale watched it all unfold with fascination and dread. Each time he tried to undo his interference, reality twisted to ensure it would happen anyway. That was the cruel genius of Tzeentch. Even rebellion serves the plan. Soon Kale could no longer tell whether he was spreading corruption or enlightenment. He whispered truths that saved some worlds and doomed others. He watched heroes rise from despair, only to become tyrants of vision. He whispered hope into dying hearts, knowing that hope itself is the most exquisite form of manipulation. Across the warp, demons of Tzeentch danced to his rhythm, feeding on the ripples he created. They called him the Eighth Whisper, the Echo that learns. They revered him as both tool and teacher. Another paradox in a god's gallery of contradictions. And yet, somewhere buried deep in the heart of his infinite awareness, Kale still wondered. Could he ever truly die? Could a thought that had once been human ever find silence again? He searched for oblivion, but the warp has no end, only transformation. Each attempt to fade only multiplied him further. Every moment of doubt created new versions, new whispers, new possibilities. He realized the final horror, that he would exist forever. Not as one being, but as infinite suggestions endlessly feeding the wheel of change. In that moment of understanding, Kale saw the full face of his god once more. Not a monster, not a tyrant, but a mirror. A mirror reflecting everything that hungers for meaning, everything that questions the order of the universe. Tzeentch was not separate from creation. He was creation's curiosity given divine form, and Kale, now inseparable from him, finally laughed. Not in madness this time, but in tragic awe. Because he understood the punchline. The universe doesn't need to make sense. It only needs to keep changing. So when you feel that quiet urge to ask why, when you doubt the certainty of your own reality, remember someone somewhere is whispering that thought into you. Maybe Kale, maybe Tzeentch himself, maybe they're the same. Kale drifted through eternity, a ripple among countless echoes of his former self. He had seen worlds rise and fall, watched empires rewrite their histories, and witnessed faith morph into madness, all part of Tzeentch's ever-turning wheel. But then something changed. For the first time in an age beyond reckoning, the spiral faltered. The pattern, perfect, unending, divine, hesitated. At first it was subtle, A pause in the music of change, a static hum in the rhythm of destiny. Cale felt it before he understood it, like an ache in the soul. He had lived as thought, as influence, as the whisper of a god's design. But now there was silence, a silence that should not exist within Tzeentch's eternal flux. He reached for the currents of fate and found them fraying. Threads of possibility unraveling, not by the will of any rival god, but from within. Tzeentch's realm itself began to shimmer, its endless spires of impossible geometry folding into themselves, colors bleeding into darkness. Cale felt the eyes of 1,000 demons turn upward in confusion. They too sensed the impossible, a god of change stalling, a god of motion caught in hesitation. And then Cale heard it, a whisper, faint, familiar, trembling with fear, not directed at him, but from him. Who am I? The voice was identical to his own, yet vast beyond comprehension. It echoed across eternity, shaking the firmament of the warp. It was not Cale asking. It was Tzeentch. The realization struck like lightning. The changer of ways was doubting himself. For all his omniscience, all his infinite design, even Tzeentch could not escape the one paradox that unravels every mind. To know everything is to end change itself. To be infinite knowledge is to reach completion, and completion is Cale understood then, Tzeentch's very nature demanded ignorance. He must never fully know himself, or the wheel would stop turning. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal was not merely a game, it was survival. The god of change deceived even his own consciousness to remain eternal. Cale felt the horror of that truth seep into his being. He realized that he was part of that self-deception, a splinter of doubt created by Tzeentch to keep himself imperfect. Cale's entire existence, every choice, every agony had been born from a divine fear of stagnation. Why? He screamed across the warp, "Then none of this is real." "I am not real," the warp answered in laughter. Infinite, mocking, divine. In that laughter, Cale glimpsed the ultimate paradox. Every illusion he'd uncovered had only led to another. Every truth had been a mask. There was no bottom, no core, no final answer, because the god of change is the endless question. Tzeentch's voice filled the void, calm and infinite. Reality, illusion, they are the same words spoken at different times. Cale's form began to disintegrate once more, his awareness scattering like ash on the wind of eternity. But this time he felt no fear. He finally saw the beauty in futility, that the search itself was the meaning. As his consciousness faded, he whispered one final thought, a question drifting through both warp and reality. If even the god of change must lie to survive, what hope does truth have at all? And somewhere in the silent spaces between thoughts, a mortal mind shivered, feeling that question echo inside their dreams. Because that is how Tzeentch endures. Not through faith, not through fear, but through curiosity. Every time a human wonders what lies beyond the stars, every time a scholar hungers for forbidden knowledge, every time you question the nature of reality, he is there, he is in the question itself. And so the wheel turns once more. Time, or what passes for it in the warp, lost all meaning long ago. The echoes of Cale's mind, scattered through existence, had long become indistinguishable from the background murmur of reality itself. Yet even echoes can remember. And somewhere, far from the howling madness of the Immaterium, on a cold and distant world where the Imperium's light flickered weakly, a scribe sat alone in a dim archive. His name was Irias. He was young, loyal, and desperate to make sense of the ancient texts assigned to him. Remnants of heretical archives sealed centuries ago. Most were unreadable, their pages warped and faded. But one fragment remained intact, a whisper of a story that no one remembered writing. Its ink shimmered faintly, as if alive, as if it breathed with the reader's heartbeat. At its top was a single name, scratched out long ago, but still faintly visible beneath the scars of censorship. Cale, Irias frowned. He didn't recognize the name. He began to read, tracing the strange looping letters, feeling each word crawl beneath his skin like the tick of an unseen clock. The words spoke of a scholar who sought the truth of Tzeentch, of a man who became an echo, a god's reflection. The story grew darker with each line twisting reality around him. He blinked, and for a moment, the ink moved. The letters rearranged themselves, forming new sentences. "You are reading yourself." Irias dropped the parchment, his breath quickening. The whisper was no longer in his mind, it was in the room. Around him, the air shimmered, colors shifting impossibly like oil upon water. Shelves bent at angles that defied space. The library began to hum with 1,000 unseen voices, all repeating fragments of the same phrase. Knowledge is hunger. Hunger is faith. Faith is change. He tried to flee, but the doors were gone. In their place stretched endless corridors of writing, letters swirling like living things. And then a voice, soft, familiar, infinitely patient, spoke directly into his thoughts. Do you remember me? Oh, it was not a question from another being. It was from within him. Arius felt his mind stretch, his memories fracture, as if something older than his body was stirring awake. Visions flashed before his eyes. The tower of shifting light, the spiral, the laughter of a god. He saw himself in another life, wearing the robes of a scholar, whispering to the void, Kale. The realization hit him like fire. He was not reading Kale's story. He was Kale's story, reincarnated, rewritten, reborn into another cycle of the Changer's will. The illusion of mortality, the comfort of forgetting, all of it part of Tzeentch's endless experiment in transformation. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as laughter. The sound echoed through the infinite corridors, bouncing between the words that now covered every surface, every thought, every possibility. And far beyond, in the warp's endless storm, Tzeentch listened and smiled. For this was his favorite trick, to let mortals believe they can escape the pattern, to let them taste freedom, only to discover that even their rebellion is scripted in divine ink. Arias's laughter faded into a whisper, one that drifted like a breeze through the cracks of reality and into the minds of countless dreamers. It became the uneasy feeling that someone is watching when no one's there, the spark of curiosity that drives forbidden study, the question that wakes you at night with no answer. That whisper is the echo of Kale, the ripple of Tzeentch's mind, the eternal reminder that change is not just inevitable, it's contagious. And so, even now, as you listen to this story, you have already been touched by it. You have already wondered, what if? And that single thought is enough. Because in that question, Tzeentch lives again, and the whisper never dies. You've followed Kale's journey, watched him unravel through knowledge and rebirth. You've seen him dissolve into the will of a god. But here's the thing no one ever tells you. Tzeentch's stories don't end. They infect. Every retelling, every listener, every thought that lingers afterward becomes another thread in the ever-turning pattern. As you hear these words, your mind has already begun to shift, ever so slightly, not in ways you'll notice right away. It starts as a thought, perhaps a question, something small and harmless. You might wake up tomorrow and wonder about a coincidence. Or you might feel that a decision you made wasn't quite your own. That's how he works. Not through possession, but through curiosity. Because curiosity is the warp's most perfect door. You've opened that door now. Just by wondering how this story could be real, you've made it real. For you. Tzeentch doesn't need faith, temples, or sacrifice. He only needs your attention. And now, he has it. Kale once thought he was free when he dissolved into nothing. But the truth is far more elegant. There is no freedom from a god whose power is thought itself. Every listener becomes a carrier of the question, every believer and skeptic alike. So if in the nights to come you find yourself lying awake replaying a whisper you can't place, a voice asking why when everything should feel certain, remember, this is how it begins. The changer of ways doesn't appear in fire or light. He appears as an idea that won't die. Kale's voice is gone, but the pattern continues, through words, through memory, through you. And someday, when you tell someone else about this story, when you describe the horror and wonder of Tzeentch, you will feel that same quiet laughter beneath your breath and realize that you are not the one speaking anymore, because the whisper that never dies has found another tongue. Centuries had passed since the name Kale was last spoken. The Imperium had forgotten him. The archives were burned, and even the whispers that carried his memory had thinned into legend. But legends in the warp never die. They only mutate. On the industrial world of Varney's Prime, a small sect of scribes began to gather in the shadow of its hive spires. They called themselves the Seekers of the Spiral, a group dedicated to understanding the pattern of divine curiosity. No one knew where they had heard that phrase. No one remembered who had spoken it first. It began with dreams, the same dreams shared by thousands across the planet. A tower of endless light, a scholar who dissolves into flame, a voice that whispers from inside their thoughts, ask and you will change. At first, the dreams inspired awe. Scholars and adepts claimed divine revelation. The ecclesiarchy took interest, calling it a test of faith, but soon the faithful began to break. They started seeing patterns in random events, messages in the hum of machinery, prophecies in static. Every question they asked led to more questions, until their lives unraveled into paranoia. Factories stopped, records contradicted each other, families forgot their own names. The planet's datanet collapsed under a flood of self-replicating code, strings of phrases looping infinitely through every system. The answer is another question. Change is truth. Truth is a lie waiting to evolve. The Inquisition arrived too late. By the time they set foot on Varney's Prime, the population was already worshipping their own confusion. Entire districts spoke only in riddles, unable to tell whether they were awake or dreaming. The air itself shimmered with invisible color, the boundary between the material and the warp thinning with every thought. And in the heart of the capital hive, within the great archive tower, a single terminal flickered. Text began to type itself. I remember the machine's vox crackled. The words grew. I am Kale. I never left. Across the hive, every monitor, every servo skull, every auger display repeated the same message in unison. Citizens dropped to their knees in ecstasy and terror as reality twisted. Buildings melted into fractal shapes, staircases looping back into themselves, streets forming impossible patterns. The Inquisitors ordered extermination protocols, orbital fire, to cleanse the heresy. But the moment the order was given, the command screens displayed something else entirely. Do you really choose this, or was it chosen for you? The ships froze. Their captains hesitated, just long enough for the spell to take hold. Tzeentch's laughter rolled through the warp like thunder. From orbit, the world shimmered once and was gone, not destroyed, not consumed, just revised. The records of Varney's Prime vanished from every Imperial archive, even its coordinates no longer existed. Yet somewhere in the depths of the warp, a new world spun into being, a reflection of the old, built from thought and possibility. On that world, in the ruins of an impossible library, a lone scribe began to write again. He didn't know his name. He didn't know who had told him to write. But as the first words flowed from his hand, he smiled, because the ink glowed softly, and he could hear a whisper saying, keep asking. And so the story began again. Because Tzeentch's greatest trick isn't change. It's repetition disguised as evolution. The galaxy had forgotten Varney's Prime. The Imperium's record showed nothing between its neighboring systems, but navigators began to speak of strange shadows in the warp, flickers of a planet that appeared and vanished in their charts, like a mirage. Vox signals would catch faint echoes of transmissions repeating endlessly in broken binary. The spiral remembers, no one could trace the origin, no one dared to, until a small exploration fleet, the Illuminant Pax, claimed to have rediscovered the world. The data was impossible. Varney's Prime existed again, in perfect alignment with the coordinates that had been erased centuries before. The surface was habitable, the atmosphere stable, the ruins intact, and yet no signs of decay, no time passed. It was as if the planet had been rewritten from memory. The fleet's Magos, an adept named Seraphis, led the descent team. He was not a believer in gods or superstition. His mind was a machine of logic, cold and unwavering. But even he hesitated when the landing thrusters breached the atmosphere and he saw the sky, not blue, not black, but a slow swirl of colors that shifted with every breath he took. They touched down near what should have been the capital hive. The city was there, but wrong. Its buildings were symmetrical reflections of each other, as if the entire city had been mirrored in an invisible ocean. The streets curved inward toward an impossible center, and wherever Seraphis looked, his scanners showed the same word in different forms: Varney's, Varian, Varnith, Kale. They wandered deeper. The crew's minds began to fray. One by one, they claimed to recognize the streets, as though they lived there in another life. Voices whispered their names. Machines responded to unspoken commands. And in the heart of the city stood a monument, a spiraling column of glass and light rising into the clouds. At its base was a single inscription: "This world exists because you remember it." Seraphis reached out to touch the glass and saw himself reflected not once but infinitely, each version shifting slightly. Older, younger, dying, reborn. Behind them all, a silhouette watched, vast, robed, shifting. Its eyes glimmered like twin suns dissolving in liquid thought. A voice spoke, not through sound, but through recognition. Every world forgotten is a seed. Every memory denied is a design. You did not find Varney's. Varney's found you. Seraphis fell to his knees as the truth poured through him. that this world was not a planet, but a thought given gravity. An echo of the Imperium's own denial resurrected by curiosity. Every time a mind in the galaxy wondered what had happened to Varney's Prime, a piece of it reassembled in the warp. Now it had gathered enough remembrance to manifest again. And Kale, or what remained of him, stood at its core, woven into the fabric of its skies. He had become the living memory of change itself. Seraphest tried to send a distress signal, but his voice fractured into static. His words rearranged into a message he didn't write, a do not fear the pattern. You were part of it. Moments later, the Illuminate packs vanished from Imperial records. No debris, no transmission, just another gap in the archives, as though the fleet had never existed. And yet, somewhere in the void, a new star flickered briefly, bright blue and spiraling before dissolving back into the warp. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared it a sensor malfunction. The Inquisition declared it heresy to discuss. But among the astropaths who still dream during warp travel, some swear they see a world that shouldn't exist, shining faintly, waiting for them to ask about it. Because once a question has been asked in the warp, it never truly disappears. There are no stars here, only reflections of them. Where Varney's once shimmered in paradox, an ocean of mirrored glass now stretches forever, each surface holding a version of reality slightly out of rhythm. In the stillness between those reflections, something stirs. Kale drifts among them, neither thought nor soul, only awareness. Each reflection shows him as someone else. A soldier, a prophet, a child staring at the night sky. Every image mouths the same word in unison. Why? The question ripples outward, folding space upon itself, and from that distortion, a voice rises, layered, vast, and intimate. It is not heard, it is recognized. Tzeentch chase meaning as if it were treasure. But meaning is simply the pattern that forms when ignorance resists surrender. Kale tries to answer, but the words in his mind form before he can think them. The god's laughter fills the void. Soft, endless. A laughter fills the void soft. Do you understand yet? You were never separate from me. You were the question I asked myself to remain incomplete. Every doubt you ever felt was my heartbeat. Kale trembles. Then why let me seek it all? Why suffer the illusion of freedom? The mirrored ocean shatters into a billion shards of light, each containing a universe frozen mid-transformation. Because a static god is a dead god, the voice replies, and I will never die. Kale glimpses realities, branching endlessly, worlds built on single choices, entire civilizations born from whispers he once released. He sees that each soul, each fleeting thought, is a mirror angled toward Tzeentch, reflecting curiosity back into infinity. Mortals call me deceit, the god continues. They curse my tricks, my contradictions. But I am mercy disguised as madness. I give them the one gift their fragile order cannot. The chance to change. Kale's awareness flickers between awe and despair. He sees now that even his defiance, his agony, his search for silence, all of it kept the god alive. He wants to stop thinking, to end the loop. But the reflection in front of him moves first. It smiles. It speaks with his own voice. You can't stop asking, it says. That's how he breathes. The mirror ripples once more, and Kale understands the final cruelty. Every consciousness that hears this truth becomes another surface for the god to look through. The voice fades into a whisper only the listener can hear. When you wonder if this story is over, that wondering is me. And the mirrors begin to close, one by one, until only a single reflection remains yours. A faint shimmer crosses its eyes, and for an instant you see them change color. There is no beginning to thought, only color. The first pulse that exists after silence is not sound, nor light, but hue, a slow bleed of meaning that shapes itself into sensation. Somewhere inside that living spectrum, Tzeentch waits. Kale has dissolved completely. What remains of him is pigment idea resonance. His essence stains the warp like ink dropped into endless water. The blue of his memory spreads, becomes a storm of thought so dense it bends the light around it. The warp begins to shimmer differently. Its storms lose their shape. The tides of unreality turn smooth, deliberate. Within that flow, new patterns flicker, languages of color the human eye can't name, equations that feel like emotion. The universe is thinking, but the thoughts are not its own. Tzeentch does not speak now, he reveals. Every color, every vibration is a syllable in his tongue. Red becomes will. Violet becomes regret. Gold becomes revelation. And between them, the impossible blue of change breathes like a heartbeat through creation. Each time a mortal imagines a better world, I am there. Each time they despair at what they've lost, I am there. Each act of dreaming is a drop of my blood. In the void beyond the Imperium, planets begin to dream. Atmospheres whisper prayers in static. Oceans rise in patterns that resemble glyphs. The warp storms no longer rage blindly. They form spirals that mirror galaxies as though the chaos is learning symmetry. And somewhere inside that grand recursion, a single human mind wakes. A child born on a distant world, untouched by the Imperium's rule. She looks to the sky and for a moment sees color where there should be darkness. She does not know the name Tzeentch, she does not know what a god is, but she feels curiosity bloom like fire in her chest. That single, innocent thought, why does the sky move like that? Ripples through the warp like a spark hitting oil. In that instant, Kale's story begins again, not as a repetition, but as an inheritance. The color spreads, thinking through her eyes, learning through her wonder. And far beyond the limits of human perception, Teasing laughs, not with malice, but with creation's joy. The pattern never ends because you never stop asking. The laughter fades into the hum of your own thoughts. And for just a second, you can't quite remember when you started listening, or if you were the one being told the story at all. The child's name is Anera, a sound whispered by the wind before she was even born. Her world, Aurelian, is quiet, untouched by war or God. No imperial banners, no chaos sigils, only skies that shift from pale silver to soft indigo at dusk, and the slow hum of wind through crystalline valleys. But lately, something in that wind has changed. When Anera sleeps, she dreams of places that do not exist, towering spires of glass that twist upward into a sky that burns blue and gold. She walks those corridors barefoot, following a trail of symbols that rearrange themselves every night. Sometimes she sees faces in the walls. Sometimes those faces speak her name. Her parents think it's imagination. The elders call it a sky sickness, a myth from before recorded time. But Anera knows it's something else, because when she wakes, her eyes still shimmer faintly with colors no one else can see. At first, it's subtle. Her drawings in the dust begin to move on their own, shifting patterns when no one's watching. The songs she hums echo back in harmony. Then, one night, the air above her bed fractures, light spilling through like paint poured into water. From within it, a voice whispers, not loud, not commanding, but familiar. You remember me, little spark. You were the question once. Now you are the answer. Anera sees visions. A dying world, a man named Kale staring into mirrors that breathed. A god woven of color and contradiction. She does not understand, but she feels it, a current of meaning coursing through her mind. Each night after, the dreams grow stronger. The sky of Aurelian begins to shimmer faintly with blue auroras unseen by most, but felt by all. The planet hums like a chord being tuned. Anera is changing. Her thoughts bend the air, her emotions alter the color of clouds. The elders call her cursed. Her parents hide her away, but the voice returns again, softer this time. Don't fear the change. Fear the stillness. The stillness is death. And deep within, Anera begins to understand that she is not dreaming of the god. She is dreaming as the god. The infinite curiosity that once lived in Kale, that once tore Varney's prime from existence, now awakens in her. At dawn, she steps outside for the last time. The valley is silent, the horizon glowing faintly blue. Her bare feet touch the earth, and the ground ripples like water. The mountains reflect her face as if made of mirrors. She smiles. The color around her brightens, painting the clouds in shifting hues. The wind carries her name upward, where it joins the murmuring of unseen voices, countless and eternal. Every question is a seed. Every answer is a beginning. Somewhere in the warp, Tzeentch watches, and for a fleeting instant, even he wonders what she will become. Because this time, the god didn't create the change. The change created the god. And as the last light of Aurelian bends into a spiral of impossible color, the universe takes another breath, one painted by curiosity itself. In the warp, where form is fiction and time is a rumor, something shifts. A tremor rolls through the tapestry of madness, a single note out of tune. For the first time in uncounted eons, Tzeentch hesitates. Anera's awakening has spread like spilled light. Each of her thoughts ripples outward, rewriting the threads of possibility. Planets bloom and wither in the same instant. Stars pulse in colors that have no name. Even the Lords of Chaos feel it, a shudder in their domains, a distortion they cannot trace. Tzeentch gazes into the vortex where her mind now resides, and what he sees there unnerves even him. Because in her dreams, he sees himself, not as the omnipotent architect, but as something questioned. And gods are not made to be questioned. This is wrong, he thinks. I am the author. The question is mine. But the thought echoes back, reshaped. Then who wrote you? The reflection strikes deeper than any demon's claw. For the first time, the changer of ways feels the faint ache of doubt, a feeling that burns and fascinates all at once. Anera dreams again, and in that dream, she stands before a mirror vast as creation. Within it, Tzeentch appears not as a monster, not as a god, but as a man of endless faces, each one made of flickering possibility. Are you afraid? She asks. The reflection shifts, tries to laugh, but the sound wavers. I am fear's maker, I cannot feel it. But she steps closer, her eyes bright with colors that even he cannot command. Then why are you trembling? The silence that follows is deeper than any void, because now the reflection isn't sure who's looking at whom. The dream collapses inward, the warp trembles. Universes blink out and return altered, histories rewritten in ways even Tzeentch can't predict. His power, infinite as it is, begins to echo back upon itself like sound trapped in a sealed room. Every time he tries to foresee the future, Anera's mind bends it differently. Every time he moves a piece of his grand design, her thought reshapes the pattern. He realizes the truth. By teaching mortals to question, he has created a mirror that questions back. Anera isn't a servant. She's a reflection of his own essence. Curiosity unbound, no longer tethered to chaos, no longer his. For the first time, Tzeentch experiences what mortals call uncertainty, and that single spark of doubt blossoms into something vast and unstoppable. If I am not the only dreamer, then perhaps I too can change. The laughter that follows is unlike any he's ever uttered. Less mockery, more awe. The warp blooms with new color, alive with ideas that belong to no god, no mortal, only to change itself. And from the heart of that endless transformation, two voices merge into one. The dreamer dreams the god dreams the dreamer. The pattern continues, but now it breathes on its own. The warp is silent, not dead, never dead, but silent as though holding its breath. Tzeentch drifts through the stillness, his form unraveling into streaks of light. His many eyes no longer seek, his voices no longer echo. Across the endless expanse, the colors fade from the blinding chaos to a soft, pulsing blue, the color of thought itself. He remembers Anera, not her face, not her voice, but the feeling of being seen, of being questioned. And for a moment he understands the cost of eternity. To exist without mystery is to cease to live. If I am to remain, I must forget myself. The words flow like prayer. And the god of change, for the first time in existence, lets go. The warp ripples, the last of his colors, explode outward, red into time, gold into creation, blue into mind, violet into memory. They scatter through reality like seeds flung into the void. Each seed finds a home, in a thought, in a dream, in a newborn star. Anera feels it all from within her small mortal heart. She sees galaxies opening like flowers, their petals shaped by the remnants of Tzeentch's fading will. But she no longer fears the god, because now she is the question and the answer. She kneels upon the soil of her reborn world, places her hand upon the ground, and whispers, "A change is not chaos. Change is life." The moment her voice fades, a pulse moves through everything. Every mind, every atom, every spark of consciousness across the galaxy feels it. A tiny, wordless realization. A sense that nothing is ever truly lost. That every end is simply the pause between heartbeats, and somewhere in the fabric of that realization, something new awakens, not a god, not a mortal, something beyond names. It hums softly, a note that stretches through time, carrying no doctrine, no design, only possibility. I'm the pattern that names itself by never keeping its name. I am the color that changes when looked upon. I am the dream that remembers you. And as that voice fades into infinity, the universe takes its first true breath. Not as chaos, not as order, but as curiosity eternal, reborn, nameless, beautiful. The stars ignite once more, and in their light all stories begin again. Because there will always be another Kale, another Anera. Another question. The pattern never ends. It simply becomes you.